Okay, so you joined the Sea Org at 17, sometime around 2000. And how long were you in, and what did you do?
Okay, graduated from high school in like June of 2000, I want to say. How long afterwards did I start? I went on staff at the Orange County Org. So I was there for like 6 months. I did not like it the entire time. Um, and I had like a study bug. Like I couldn't finish my staff status 1 and 2 and like the other courses that are in there in time. I'd been on staff for like 3 months without like finishing like 2 courses, you know what I mean? And I was in the middle of like this other course, and they wouldn't let me finish that one until I'd done my staff statuses, so they interrupted that. And then like, there's this whole thing. Anyways, eventually I just quit. I want to say I was like 17-ish at that point. And then I was on staff when I was like 16 going on 17. And then when I turned 17 and some change, I got recruited for the Sea Org, New World Corps, which was that part of the Sea organization which is dedicated to auditing St. Hill-sized staff members up the bridge.
Did you know they got rid of the New World Corps?
Oh, really? It kind of doesn't surprise me. It's a little redundant. It's kind of like like when I was there, it was just starting on its first legs, and like very small budget, and like people in the HGB would laugh at us in the halls, like because we had like a bad rep, like we had like kind of an incompetent rep around there in the HGB. Like
what?
New World Corps was like this new organization. CMO comes in. They like slam these people into place, like they kick people out of these offices, move them over here. They like upgrade these offices over here. And like now, this whole section is for New World Corps. And these New World Corps guys come in, they act like they're like, too cool for school. They don't know shit about anything that goes on in the HGB. We have to like hold their hand the entire time. And like, we're supposed to serve them. I've been in the Sea Org 20 years. This guy's like been in the Sea Org 5, like, all this stuff. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Okay, so if you were in the Sea Org to be in the New World Corps, does that mean you went on to like full-time training to be an auditor, or did you have like an administrative post?
I was mostly administrative. The goal was to be an auditor because like anybody was an auditor. Like that was the pinnacle of like coolness in Scientology was to be an auditor. Mostly my plan, and like when you were in the New World Corps, like part of the plan was like you were going to co-audit up the bridge all the way to like OT a million, whatever. What was the question?
No, you actually answered that question. You were mostly an admin staff member in New World Corps.
What I wanted to say was I was the project prepare IC at New World Corps mostly. So like people that were recruiting, they had like a list of goals that they had to meet before they were ready to leave, drop everything in their entire lives and move into the Sea Org base behind locked doors. Before they were ready for that, the project prepare IC had to like, basically nudge them along, kind of product offers to them, make them, move on to the next step, write like ethics reports if they're not, moving quickly enough and progressing. Here they are, they signed the billion-year contract. They've got a project prepare, and my job is to get them signed up and, in the building.
So just for everyone else who's watching, any Sea Org base that has a recruiter, when they get someone to sign a Sea Org contract, that person's not a Sea Org member yet. That's the signing the contract is basically you're sort of promising that you will join the Sea Org in the future. And then the recruiter puts together what's called the project prepare, which could be 10 or 20 or 6 steps of what you say, I have to handle these things before I can arrive to the Sea Org. And then every Sea Org base has a project prepare IC, if they have enough staff members, whose weekly statistic is how many of these steps were accomplished this week from all of the people that have promised to join the Sea Org and are working towards it. So how long were you on that post?
Only like a few months. My whole time on staff and in the Sea Org was I really didn't want to be there the whole time. So it was like I was just dragging my feet just all over the place. Like slow to study. Here, if I want to keep a post, I got to get mini hatted like quick. There's studying you got to do. You got all this stuff, blah blah blah. Everywhere I went, like, I just didn't feel like I belonged. Like there were all these people that, like, I just didn't feel like I had much in common with. And like, there's not time. It's not like there's a lot of time to hang out anyway. I mean, there were people that, like, I definitely had fun with. You get into like these like frat like antics sometimes when you're in dormitory situations with other dudes who are like teenagers as well, especially. What was the question?
Well, how long were you in the Sea Org total?
Almost 2 years. I never got out of swamper status or achieved veteran status. I spent 3 months on the EPF, and then, like, I want to say 6 months kicking around like New World Corps and like an FLO, and like at one point I actually worked at the PAC the Cadet Estates Org over at the PAC land base up in what is the name of that place? It's like up north, north of Los Angeles. There's the Cadet Estates Org where, like, they keep all the 10-year-olds that can't be in the Sea Org until after they've.
Well, is that the same CEO that you were a part of when you were younger?
Pretty much, like, different organizational structure and everything. I mean, it was like, well, I mean, it was like 12 years later, but I mean, a lot had happened in that 12 years. You know what I'm saying? And it sounds like a heck of a lot more has happened in the last 12 years.
I mean, now they don't have the Cadet Org out at PAC anymore. It's funny. They just became too much of a pain in the ass and too much of a liability. I mean, from the Sea Org viewpoint, that's all these kids ended up being.
I saw those kids were so sad, man. Like, I was actually the project. I was the Cadet Estates Project IC, meaning, like, I was kind of like the EPF IC, but for the cadets. Meaning, like, there were projects around the base, or not the base, what they call it, the ranch. There was like greenhouses, there was a garden, and a pretty sizable garden. I think it was like about an acre or two, something like that. And they would plant vegetables and stuff, and then they would go on, like, a CSP, clean ship project, on Saturdays and on Sundays when they're cleaning the berthings and stuff. They'll come by in the morning, and they'll have cooked, all the the kids from the CEO will have cooked like cinnamon rolls, and they'll bring, like, fresh vegetables and stuff and sell them to the Sea Org members, and maybe get a chance to see their parents on the side. You know what I mean? And, like, those kids were sad. They had to go. They had to do homeschooling, and there was a classroom there, and they had, like, they had, like, this German lady who, like, crapped out of the New World Corps and decided to chill out with the kiddies over at the ranch school. There were projects like putting railroad ties along the sidewalks, gardening, pulling weeds, stuff like that. And I had projects that I had to get completed, and I would have to, like, recruit the kids to do it. And most of them would disappear if you turn your back, and they just lost in the woods, out in the brush, up in the mountains up there. They're just gone. You know what I mean? And, like, the only thing, like, and they wouldn't listen to what we had to say at all. And, like, I had to like write KRs on them and CC their parents in order to, like, actually, like, get them to start, like, paying attention to me and, like, doing what I said. I was like 18 at the time. It sucked. It was like a terrible job because these kids were, like, young. The oldest was like 16, 17 years old. They don't have anywhere else to go. Their parents are in the Sea Org. They're stuck at this fucking, like, concentration camp for children. Like, crazy. Like, their free time, they have such a weird schedule, and, like, good food though. I gotta say, they did have good food. They lived in, like, these huge cabins, I want to call them, because, I mean, it was just like, central bathroom with, like, a huge row of sinks and, like, shower stalls, and then, like, all, in a ring around that, like, a bunch of bedrooms and, like, bunk beds stacked everywhere, and all these kids, like, the girls' dorm and the boys' dorm. Oh
Yeah.
man, those kids had so much underage sex that we did not know about. They must have. Those kids
Man, oh,
were
man.
those kids were 13 to 16 to 17-year-old kids. And like, you know, all they had to they had the Disney Channel to listen to on the radio. They had the Disney radio station. So they had like these weird like references that I'd never heard of, you know, as an 18-year-old out in the real world, like because all they had was Disney and like books, you know.
Those kids who their parents were in the Sea Org and they grew up and just their existence was this weird pseudo cadet Sea Org existence, not really in the real world, like just a sliver, only a sliver in the real world, but no real education, no real job training, no real job experience, no driver's licenses, no bank accounts, no, you know, those are the kids, those are the Scientology kids that I think struggle the most later on.
I couldn't tell you. I do know that there were a couple kids that like came back from being out in the WOG world, as it's called. You know, and these kids were like messed up, like, you know, behavioral issues and stuff like that. I think, you know, probably because like they weren't raised by their parents, you know, and they didn't have like constant supervision from like responsible adults, probably has something to do with it. You know what I mean?
Well, right. I mean, these kids have no concept of a nuclear family. They're always being raised by someone who's not their parents and doesn't really give a shit about them and doesn't see them as a son or a daughter, but just a part of an organization.
Well, you know, I will say this about most of the teachers, most of the people who are over the kids, like they had genuine like love for these kids. I noticed the vast majority of them, like, you know, they thought they were just so cute and they just smiled, you know, every time they came up. And you know, the behavioral problems were just like, you know, just a sad thing that they had to deal with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like that's the thing, like Scientology fucking sucks, but like it ropes in such good people. I mean, it's got such a good like it's such a pure good uh veneer Scientology. You know what I mean? Like it makes you it has like this shining golden like vibe to it when you first, you know, meet it, when you first come to contact with it, and then it just gets more and more sinister the deeper you go. It's just like, oh shit, where am I now?
Yeah.
What the fuck did I just get myself into?
Yeah. Hey, who are some of the people that you remember from back then? Whether it's people you got close to in the Sea Org or some of the kids you remember who were the older kids from the CEO. Some names, because, you know, a lot of former Sea Org members and Scientologists watch these videos and interviews. Who are some people you remember?
Like from when I was in the CEO, like when I was a kid,
No, when you were
or
older.
like, oh, like when I was in the Sea Org back then.
Yeah.
Like I remember Trevor Sales. He's the guy who recruited me for New World Corps. I remember Rose Miracle, who like I think they divorced now because I do believe that he is like anti-Scientology now. She was like my boss. She was like the has in New World Corps. Ilya Lonitz, Yuri Lonitz. Who else? I knew like Rui Freira.
Hey, Trevor
Rudolph
Sales was
Freira.
this red-haired kid, right?
Trevor Sales, brown hair, balding, similar. I think probably similar to what mine looks like.
Okay, what about, did you know Gabriel Matoyer?
Yes, yeah. Him and Trevor Sales are like best buds.
Yeah, they were both recruiters, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about, do you remember, like, I mean, you were just talking about this time when you were 18 working up at the ranch school or whatever. Any kids you remember their names from that time?
Oh, like I mean, like some of them were familiar to me, um, because like I knew their parents, like just by like acquaintance. Like, oh, you know, oh, do you know like Sarah? Like, oh yeah, that's my mom. Oh, okay. I know her. It's cool. I'll tell her you said hi next time. But yeah, for the most part, yeah, I know.
Yeah, okay, cool. So then what made you leave the Sea Org finally?
I left the Sea Org finally. I don't really want to get into that. Basically, I got fitness boarded. I didn't actually want to leave. Like, I wanted to leave, but I wasn't like, you know, trying to under my own power. They just decided, like, you know, time for you to.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click